Maverick parent is somebody who realizes that they cannot raise their child in the bubble. Maverick parent is like the antithesis of a helicopter parent. They go, this is what's out there. The kids are going to experience it. Let's get them ready. So love, number one, ethics, number two, and number three, teaching them to be self-sufficient. Mammals all over this planet, their main goals are to get their offspring to go out into the world on their own. And humans tend to forget that. Parents tend to forget that that is our primary goal, is to get these kids out there to do things on their own. I actually kind of like kids staying closer to their parents. We live in a society where everybody takes off. I don't know about you, but I moved out when I was 15. Then as soon as I graduated high school, I went to Europe and pretty much am just now coming back. So that really breaks down the family structure during a period of time where kids do need support, their elders need support, and having a closer community is great. But these kids should not be living off of their parents. The parasitic relationship, not so much. You actually need to be of benefit to the household that you're living in, whether you are living with your parents or your roommates or whatever. You cannot be a parasite. Mm-hmm. Parents need to be saving their money for retirement. Their kids have the ability to make money and have the rest of their lives to set themselves financially up for success. Whereas parents, you're getting closer and closer to the time of your life where you really need to be watching out for yourself. And I'm not a huge advocate for parents totally funding college, all that kind of stuff. I think kids need to be making those critical choices themselves financially and holding that responsibility.
Welcome to yourbrilliance.com. I'm your host, Amy Waterman. And today we're talking to all you parents out there who are struggling to find a way to talk to your kids about the stuff that matters. Stuff like how babies are made, when touching crosses a line to being inappropriate, when relationships cross a line to being abusive. Now, these are all things that kids do need to know, but it's incredibly hard to talk about it. That's why we've invited Emily Gaudreau onto the show. Emily is a parenting coach and sexual abuse prevention educator. She's the mother of 4 children who she's raising to be mavericks, which she defines as kids with a work ethic, grit, and empathy. She's also the host of the popular podcast, How to Raise a Maverick. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Amy. That was a great introduction.
Well, we have tons of questions to ask you, and so I'm going to start out with a really difficult one. What do you think is the most challenging issue facing our kids today?
Well, Amy, this is an interesting one because right now in the United States, this is the safest time since the 1960s. There's so much fear-mongering about all this crazy stuff going on out there. And this is literally the time when kids used to run around in the streets, come home when the street lights came on. That's the time that we're back at. But depression and suicide are the biggest things that are affecting our kids now. These are the biggest concerns that parents should have with their kids. And a lot of this can be pointed back to potentially the social media aspect of life now that we live in. But I think it's also got a lot to do with parents being uneducated about the fact that your kids are not the boogeyman is not coming to get your kids.
Yeah, we need to empower our children.
He really is not. Yes.
Yeah. So you have a style of parenting called maverick parenting. What is that, and how does it help kids address these issues that are affecting them? The things that might be struggling with their mental health.
Yeah. So a maverick parent is somebody who realizes that they cannot raise their child in the bubble. Maverick parent is like the antithesis of a helicopter parent. They go, this is what's out there. The kids are going to experience it. Let's get them ready. So love, number one, ethics, number two, and number three, teaching them to be self-sufficient. Mammals all over this planet, Their main goals are to get their offspring to go out into the world on their own. And humans tend to forget that. Parents tend to forget that that is our primary goal, is to get these kids out there to do things on their own.
And that is so true. I was astounded by Jean Twange's book about iGen, and she talks about how more and more kids today are living with their parents for longer and longer. Few of them have bank accounts. Few of them go off on their own without mom and dad. And so it's true that we are failing our kids in that respect.
Yeah, there's two sides to that. I actually kind of like kids staying closer to their parents. We live in a society where everybody takes off. I don't know about you, but I moved out when I was 15. Then as soon as I graduated high school, I went to Europe and pretty much am just now coming back. So that really breaks down the family structure during a period of time where kids do need support. Their elders need support, and having a closer community is great. But these kids should not be living off of their parents. The parasitic relationship, not so much. You actually need to be of benefit to the household that you're living in, whether you are living with your parents or your roommates or whatever. You cannot be a parasite.
Absolutely.
Not a nice way to say it, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Parents need to be saving their money for retirement. Their kids have the ability to make money and have the rest of their lives to set themselves financially up for success. Whereas parents, you're getting closer and closer to the time of your life where you really need to be watching out for yourself. And I'm not a huge advocate for parents totally funding college, all that kind of stuff. I think kids need to be making those critical choices themselves financially and holding that responsibility.
So one of the ways we need to start out is obviously we need to start out by making parenting choices quite young to help our kids navigate these complex decisions
Yes.
that they make in future. And one of those areas that is very difficult for parents to help their kids with is, of course, sexuality. We've got such a sexual culture right now. We've got boys who feel pressured to have as much sex as they can, and girls who feel pressured to act sexual, but of course never actually acted out. And yet a lot of these kids don't even know the practicalities of how babies are made. So how can we start out helping our children make good decisions about sex?
Okay. First of all, it starts from day one. And I know recently that there was a sex educator who was talking about, asking permission to change a diaper. I agree with her 100%. If you Google it, I should have gotten her name, but everybody was all up in arms that how could you ask a baby to change their diaper? What is happening there is not so much the baby responding, oh, sure, you can change my diaper now. It's you getting into the state of mind of teaching them consent from very early on. And I don't know if that was her approach, but that's my angle. You have to teach yourself to change how you speak to your kids from day one. And when these kids come into our lives, we've been free spirits and doing and saying whatever we want. And we really have to shift gears, get over our sexual hangups, and talk about sexuality like it's breakfast cereal. That means casual and often. And it's really just not a big deal. And this is hard because a lot of people go, oh, my child's going to become really promiscuous because they have all this information. Well, the research shows that that in other countries where they do talk about sex casually, they wait longer to have intercourse, and they do it with long-term partners. So they are not having one-night stands. They're not getting drunk at parties and having sex. They're actually having responsible, loving relationships, which is, I don't care what side of the coin you are on. That's really, at the end of the day, what we want our kids to be doing.
So what if you're a parent who missed the boat and your kid is now 12, let's just say puberty age, because that's when everything grosses them out, and you want to make a shift, but you are really terrified because you haven't laid any groundwork? Do you suddenly start using the anatomically correct names for private parts? What do you do at that age?
This is challenging because you have you've got two different shock factors. The highest shock factor is yourself. And you need to realize that your kids are not freaked out. You are freaked out. They don't even, somebody asked the other day, their child came up and was like, hey, what does intercourse mean? The parent totally freaked out. You got to ask your mom. I don't know. They're not talking about like, how do you have sex or can I have sex? Just the definition of the word. So the number one thing you need to do is, if you can find books are always good depending on the age of your kid, have those around. And then when you're watching images on TV, there are certain situations, and that's a great way to broach a subject. You don't need to go into a diatribe about it. Nobody wants to be lectured about sex. I don't care how old you are, as we lecture you about sex right now. But it's a great way to mention things casually in there in a non-judgmental way. And remember, your kids are listening to your conversations that you have with other adults. You can very easily plant seeds by talking to your spouse, to your partner, to other people within earshot. Those kids are listening to everything. And if your kid goes, Mom, I don't want to talk about this, it doesn't mean they didn't hear.
Okay.
Just keep it up, and just try not to make it weird. Like the sex talk is out.
I'm so glad. I don't know about you, but I still remember the sex talk. I don't think anybody of my generation can forget. And trust me, it always flops. It never, ever succeeds.
Yeah. And there's no way you can, sex is, when you talk about sex, we're talking about biology, about relationships. It is one of the coolest things about being a human. It is where we get our vitality. It's where we connect with other humans. And it's also ways, it can go the other way very, very easily. It's such a powerful, powerful force for good or evil, really, is in that really primitive parts of our brains. And it can be magical or otherwise, and just approach sex like it's a very cool thing. It's very cool. That's how babies are made. That's one of the most magical things ever, right. And really connecting with another person. And it is one of the few things that's like can be pure pleasure or pain if it's not done right.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question about the difference between sexuality and sex. So I'll tell you a quick story. My daughter was on Skype last weekend, and she had a little tank top on because it was really hot. And she kept pulling her tank top up because, it was really hot. And, she's 6 years old, so it wasn't a problem. But her grandmother said, you don't show anybody your parts. And she didn't understand. And she was really angry. And so it's hard to tell a kid at that age why certain parts of the body should be covered up. And I know other 6-year-olds who grew up watching MTV, and they can dance like Beyonce, and they can thrust, their pelvis out, and they can really do the moves. At that age, how do you explain what sexuality is, and maybe why certain things are appropriate for Beyonce, but not necessarily for a child?
Okay, so here's the first thing. Turn Beyonce off. Beyonce, I love you, but it is a serious mixed message. And our bodies are private because they're wicked special. And we don't just, if you give it out or show people that's to strangers or whatever, that's not special. We keep things special and close, and we share things with people we trust, know, and like. And then it's also, if you go into my podcast, I actually have a conversation with my 5-year-old daughter about body safety. And body safety is sexual abuse prevention. It's good touch, bad touch, all that kind of stuff, what to do when somebody touches you. And you have to start from a very early age talking about people not touching their private parts. What are your private parts? Your private parts are what is covered by your swimsuit. And what if you show it, it means that you want people, and this is a hard one, I know the feminists are going to come and like bite my jugular out, but showing your private parts is an invitation for touch. And that is something that is private for you, and you want to save that for somebody special. So if it is seen as being an open and available.
So let's have that conversation now with a teenage girl
Okay.
who wants to be sexy. All of her friends wear the skimpy little outfits. And she says, Mom, duh, this is what everybody wears. There's nothing wrong with it. How would you have the conversation about body safety with a teen who doesn't really want to listen?
Okay. So with a teen, if we're talking later, a little bit later teens, first of all, you do not purchase these clothes for them. If they want to wear their short shorts, that's not in your house, it's not under your roof, and that's not with your money. So they can just set a stance. They will do it. They will sneak, and that's their jam. That's their deal. It's okay, but you're not condoning it because it can be a dangerous message. And the other thing is you're also more of an advisor at that point. So your daughter may be wearing short shorts, and you could say, do you know what this looks like? And if you can develop a relationship where you can you're kind of asking, does this look good? Does that look good? And that's kind of a normal interaction. Is my dress too short? I ask my daughter that. Does this look okay? And she will tell me, she's like, it's maybe just a little bit too much. And she's 5.5. And she gets that dialogue of, it just feels like a lot of skin. So you can say, do you want to see what you look like? I'll take a picture of you from behind here. And just let them know. Mm-hmm. Just let them know what other people see. I have been in lines. This is my pet peeve. I don't want to see another woman's butt when I'm like in line at Starbucks. Yeah. It really makes me feel very uncomfortable to see other women's bodies at that level. I don't want to see men's in short shorts either.
No, it is. It's good because it's not talking about you doing something bad. It's talking about respect for people and also looking your best, isn't it?
Yeah. It makes other people feel uncomfortable. And also when you're out in public, you can see, but there will be somebody that is wearing not a lot of clothing. And you could say, it's just, wow, that makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't feel good for her right now. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make her look smart, and kind of have that conversation to where you see it from, you're not talking about her, you're talking about somebody else.
Yes. Okay. So let's go back to that teenage girl or teenage boy, and let's talk about relationships. This is the age where they're starting to have relationships, and hopefully they've developed a sense of when to make good choices in terms of having sex and how far they want to go. But one of the issues that has really come to a lot of awareness is how many abusive teen relationships are out there. There are studies that say between 10 and 30% of teens have been in an abusive relationship. And this may not be sexual, this may be physical or emotional or verbal abuse. How can we talk to teens about what is healthy in relationships at a time when they really don't want to listen to us?
Again, the movies, PG means parental guidance. And if you're watching the movie with a kid, it's so good to chime in and just make comments while you're watching these movies. Like if anybody ever treats you that way, that's wrong. I can't imagine, I don't even want to watch this. This is so upsetting to watch somebody be treated that way. Make sure that they can define what is maltreatment and not, what is abusive and what's not. Now, this is a really difficult thing that this generation is dealing with that we didn't have to as much, is they watch sexual violence on the internet on a regular basis, and that's the online pornography. And you can put all the parental controls on, and you should, but at the age of 12, your child is watching and has seen violent pornography. These are, I know, isn't it? I'm sorry to.
I think about Game of Thrones, and I can't do Game of Thrones. I know so many people love it, but I just think some things I don't want to watch. I don't want to bring that into my house.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And that's perfect. As a parent, that's exactly what you want. Your kids are going to go out into the world. They're going to see whatever. But at the end of the day, you are that little voice of consciousness going, you know what, deep down, I know this isn't right. You know, and it'll happen for a while, but after a while it'll wear on them and they just go, you know what, I can choose otherwise. But those images and those experiences and watching those violent movies and watching the violent pornography is an example for them as to what happens in reality. And if you have a girl that is exposed to violent pornography and after the age of 12, she has been, that's what she thinks is okay in a relationship. So you really have to do a lot of work to undo that, to understand that as women, we have power in our lives and in the bedroom. We are not porn stars unless we want to be, but we set our lines of what is acceptable and what is not. And a lot of the things that happen in those, I won't go into the specifics, but if you have an older child, specifically talking about those things, name it. Name what is happening in those films and say, this is not normal. This is entertainment that has been accelerated to get you addicted. Mm-hmm. This is not acceptable behavior. If anybody ever does this to you, if we're talking to our girls or our boys, do not let anybody do that to you if you don't want to. Because the things that happen, we know aren't fun. We know that stuff isn't fun. Those are actors. So just let them know that they have that power.
So talk to us. You have your podcast, How to Raise a Maverick, and you've got a free gift on your website to help parents have some of these discussions. Talk to us about the work you do helping parents like us get through to our kids.
Yes. So the main thing that I do is I help parents get over their own hangups. The kids are way beyond us because of the internet. And we have to learn how to talk. We really have to be sex educators. And honestly, most of the people that I interview, I do all my own research. I talk to predators, I talk to survivors, I talk to everybody and find out really what's going on out there. And we've got to get over our prudish nature and address these things straight out. So that's what I do. I talk about the unspeakable things. One of the number one things is I talk about anatomy, and especially with women, and I know you have a lot of women that listen in. Can I use anatomically correct words?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. A lot of us refer to our lady bits as our vagina. Like if we say, oh, we're talking anatomically correct. No, that is not anatomically correct. Your vagina, with the word vagina, actually comes from the word knife sheath. When you talk about your genitalia, you are talking about your vulva, your labia, your clitoris. Yes. Everybody goes, oh, that doesn't mean, why does that matter? It's like calling a penis a urethra. We would never do that.
I'm going to admit right now, I bought my daughter a book because I knew I needed to have this conversation. And until I read my daughter's book, I actually didn't realize that the proper name was vulva and not vagina. And how old am I? I felt humiliated. I thought, how did I not learn it? But again, we go back to the sex talk I had, and I don't know how old I was. This was all I got, was about 5 minutes in the car driving somewhere with my mother.
Yes.
And that was it.
Yeah. And if you say, okay, well, it's covered in sex ed. Well, when you look at the sex education diagrams, you've got that little like cow head that's like, looks like the University of Texas logo or whatever with the horns. And it completely eliminates all the central parts of a female anatomy. And a great way to kind of get that, this is one of my rants, but things like that where we go, okay, let's really talk about what's there because it's mentionable. Talk about the pleasurable parts of the female anatomy. Talk about wetness. I know we talk about ejaculation and wet dreams and stuff like that. Nobody talks about girls having an erotic response or, and this is a massive gap between a child being able to communicate to somebody that they have been abused. One of the number one things that predators do is they say, well, you were aroused because you wanted it. You had an orgasm and you clearly wanted it. And that is the thing that will take a child from being abused until they're 50 to actually admit that they were abused, because it takes that long for them to get the education that, oh, just because I had an orgasm didn't mean I wanted to be sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
It's an autonomic response. So things like that, there's just a really huge gap of knowledge of our sexuality that, and a lot of the education that I'm doing, teaching parents how to talk to their kids, it's really helping the parents. And they're coming out and they're going, I was abused. And now hearing that go, oh my gosh. So it's a double layers of education. Anyways, you can go onto my site and I have a free download that will help you. And my blog posts, the 4 sneaky myths about sex abuse prevention. And those are the things that people things like that they just don't realize or don't think of. And then I've got some other downloads that will make you 99% more on top of this than even most therapists.
Fantastic. And for those of you watching, if you want to go and find out more and get the downloads yourself, we've got a link for you. Just go to yourbrilliance.org/maverick. That's yourbrilliance.org/maverick. Thank you, Emily, for coming on and talking to us. And I wondered if you had any last message you would like to leave our viewers with.
I think one of the most important things that you can do, I'm talking to women and parents, go outside. The more you can be in nature, the more you're in contact with the universal laws that happen out there, the more you'll be able to understand what's going on in your life, online. All of these things are intertwined. This online community that we've built is not separate from the laws of the universe that we live in. Just go and fill your bucket with sunshine and flowers. I'm a plant girl. So just go outside.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you out there for watching. We hope to see you again soon. Until then, let your brilliance shine.